Good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast with me. Special hello to Russ, who's way out in Hawaii. I guess with daylight savings, you're not getting up too early. But I love the fact that you guys are here. I am going to get started in just 1 second. Just turning off my scrolling stuff. I left them on yesterday, and for those who pay attention, it gets a little annoying, especially when it covers up good information. But we're going to be diving into today's training. Hey, Jade, I see you there. Happy Thanksgiving almost, right? One more day. I like to start off the training with a tip as a thank you for those showing up early and on time. I appreciate you showing up early and on time. Today's tip is from Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. Stephen Covey, 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. His habit number 1, which I didn't need him to write a book for because I've been doing this my whole life, is be proactive. And I really want to just reemphasize this as a tip for us as we go into today's training, which is about being proactive around capture and government sales, but also just understanding what's the opposite of proactive, right? So proactive is making things happen. The opposite is reactive. That's watching things happen. And I really want you to make sure you're taking charge of your day, the rest of your 2023 calendar year, and your direction for 2024 from a proactive approach or standpoint, right? Proactively look forward and go, what do I want to happen today, this week, this year, or next year, and make it happen. Don't let it just happen to you, because that's being reactive and it's never really good for any of us. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into today's training. I'm going to make sure I'm getting my slides all shared. Today, we're going to be talking about how to get into federal buyer doors to shape opportunities. So in particular, I'm coming at this getting into federal agency doors from a capture perspective. A lot of us understand, right? I think if you've been in government contracting long enough, you understand that you need to get in to these federal agency doors. You need to talk to people in order to influence the opportunities. And when we say influence and opportunity, we're really talking about minimizing anything that is a weakness of ours that's in that RFP that's going to come out, and maximizing or emphasizing anything that's our strength. So trying to get it put into the requirements or into the RFP, or getting the buyer to think about it, or from the acquisition approach as well, maybe getting it on our contract vehicle. But no matter what it is, that's not today's training, but it's about getting in, right? Imagine having conversations where you have an opportunity in your pipeline and you can go in and have a conversation with a program office, somebody in the program office, whether it's the program manager or people farther down the line, or even people who are influential to that program office that might own the contract, but they're also impacted by the requirement. Imagine having conversations with them about the solutioning or the direction they should be thinking. Imagine having conversations with contracting officers, KOs or COs, right? If you don't know this, by the way, occasionally I just remind people that CO stands for contracting officer, except for in the military, it stands for commanding officer. So we say COs or KOs. In the military, it's contracting officer, KOs. But imagine having conversations with the contract officer, the contract specialist, the acquisition professionals who were responsible for that opportunity you want to win. The ability to talk to them about which NAICS code or which contract vehicle, which set aside they're using, any of this activity. When you have these conversations, you're going to be able to influence the requirement. When you can have conversations, you're going to increase your likelihood of writing a winning proposal, because you're really writing it not just to what's on paper in an RFP, but also from what you've learned in conversations, right? And I think this statement in bullet number 3 is pretty darn clear. Sales in your business requires you to do capture, and capture requires you to have relationships. That's where we want to take you. That's the solution to getting into doors, is having relationships. The challenge that I faced when I was a government contractor was people would say the success is in relationships. Capture requires relationships. I'm like, cool. How can I get those relationships? Could I have 2 or 3 of them, please? No one would tell us how. Well, today's training, right? And all the training I do is always focusing on not just the what, but the how of it. Today, I want to talk to you about digging your well before you're thirsty, right? This means thinking long-term, not just today and what you need today, but you're not thirsty today. You don't need those relationships today. You need them going forward in the out months and out years. And so digging your well before you're thirsty is what we'll start with. And then we'll talk about 2 big tips on how you can really increase your likelihood of getting into federal doors. And so the first one will be become a visible subject matter expert, right? Your company or yourself as a visible subject matter expert and a trusted advisor to the very people you're trying to get into, the agency buyers. Those agency buyers are no different than you. They're looking on the internet before they ever start pursuing a requirement in any official way. They're going out to the internet, right? We all do. That's just a way of life. And then I'm going to wrap up today with showing you some tips on how to maximize the value of industry day events. And so we'll dive into that. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonald. I want to welcome you to my federal sales training, where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years in the federal market as a small business owner, and since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. When we follow a process A to Z, we're going to have repeatable, predictable results, and that's what I want for you. As you go forward, do me a favor, engage in the community. Let others in this community know you're around. If you're on a different platform like Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, come on over to LinkedIn. People on LinkedIn, we're open to connecting. And this is where you start having a network. On YouTube, you watch training, which is awesome. I love being there. But this is where we have a community, because YouTube just doesn't enable it, right? So come into LinkedIn and connect with each other when you can. By the way, a pro tip on networking: give without expectation. That means from today's perspective, give introductions. If you can ever make an introduction between two people, make it and then step away, right? Don't expect anything out of it. Just make as many introductions as you can that make sense, right? Don't just try to do a numbers game. But when you see it, go, oh, I know what these two people want, and you guys would value meeting each other. There you go. I'm out of here. All right. So let's dive into starting with talking about digging your well before you're thirsty. And actually, the first time I ever heard this line, I'm just grabbing through 1,000 books I keep right next to me. But Harvey Mackay, he wrote a book called Dig Your Well, ironically, Before You're Thirsty. And its subtitle is The Only Networking Book You Ever Need. I've had this book for years. First time I read it was back in the beginning of 2000, right? So 20 years ago. And I know I met him. I don't know him anymore, but I met him. But the whole idea was just so obvious. The most brilliant things are very obvious, right? Don't wait until you're thirsty to start digging your well. Dig it now, because by the time you get down to the water, if you start when you're thirsty, you're not going to be able to make it to the water. But if you start now, you'll be fine. And it's the same thing in networking and building relationships with the very people in the agencies that you want to talk to. If today's training is about how do you get into agency doors in order to pursue opportunities more, then you need to have these relationships in place already. Otherwise, you're kind of looking desperate, right? I'm coming in, I'm trying to ask questions, the RFP is going to drop. But imagine if you get a head start 6, 12 months early, right? You start building relationships, and you truly are building this relationship with the interest of, how do I get to understand that other person? Not just how can they help me win, but how can I get to understand their agency, their program office, their needs, and share my needs. And so getting in the doors absolutely requires the relationships. And I just wanted to make sure we're all understanding the 3 different types of relationships that you can have. So in sales, there's 3 types of relationships. Focuses or receptivity are these people who are willing to help you and they can navigate, but they really don't have any influence or impact on the sale. They're just willing to help you learn about their agency and make introductions. So those are focuses or receptivity. And the most obvious one in the federal government are small business specialists. They have no real impact at all on a requirement the government has, but they can help you navigate the agency and learn about the agency. The second one is focus of dissatisfaction. These are typically the program office. These are the people who have the challenges or the needs, the goals, right? They might not have a problem today, but they have future requirements that they want. And that makes them dissatisfied with how things are being done today. And those are the very people you want to meet, right? They're the ones where you can really understand the challenges and the problems and the goals and how they align to your products or services, your solution. So coming in, so you want to build relationships with focuses of dissatisfaction. The third group of people are the focuses of power. In the federal government, these are the acquisition professionals. In particular, it's the contracting officer. Only the contracting officer signs a contract, right? So you want to have a relationship with somebody or multiple people from each one of these 3 types of relationships. When you do, you're covering down on an agency from the 3 different angles that will lead to a win for your opportunity. The other thing I wanted to put here, and sometimes I find people are hesitant to give specific recommendations or numbers, but I say you should have 24 relationships, right? That's a good, and by the way, these are strategic relationships. So these are ones that you're investing a lot of time. The idea behind strategic relationships and general relationships you have within your network is that strategic relationships require a lot of energy, a lot of time commitment in there. Imagine your own personal relationships, right? You got maybe a lot of people you know people from church, you know people from work, you know people from the bowling league, whatever, but they're not all close friends. And think of a strategic relationship like a personal close friend. You have really only room for 3 to 5 close friends because they require a lot of energy. You're listening to their problems or their goals and their dreams of where they want to go. You're attending a lot of their events, their kids' events, or they go to their sporting events, or you're attending whatever. It takes a lot to have one close personal relationship. So 5 is a really good amount, right? You can have a lot of second tier friends, right? I don't mean it in a bad way. I just mean you're not investing and they're not investing as much time in it. But when we get together, we have a blast, right? I have a lot of people like that in sailing, for example. When we get together, it's like, oh, it's the best thing ever. But we don't do anything with the relationship when it's offline. But there's other people where I maintain the relationship. And in the professional side, you want that same time. You don't have to worry about 5 people because you don't have to invest as much time as you would a personal relationship. So I say you can have 24 relationships, 8 strategic relationships with these 3 types of people: receptivity, dissatisfaction, and power. So 8 of those relationships within an agency. That really, within one agency, right? Within your target agency, that really helps you get to know that agency and to begin to bounce back and forth and have people you can go to have conversations with. The 8 small businesses and 8 large businesses, these are fundamentally the top 8 winning prime contractors, small business and large businesses, at that same target agency. So it doesn't have to be the highest winning. It has to be the highest winning that align to what you want. You can help them and they can help you. Some people sometimes call it a cultural fit, just really more of a mutual growth fit is what I'm looking for. But you want these relationships because when you have these relationships, they only, especially the business relationships, they are 15 to 30 minutes every 2 weeks. You're having meetings and you're talking about a pipeline, you're moving things forward, especially if you're focused on a target agency, you're able to talk about that. Well, when you think about 16 meetings, a half hour, that's only 8 hours invested into these strategic relationships that will help you grow. 8 hours in an 80-hour work period, right? 2 weeks, you're meeting 8 hours with these people, and then you've got 72 hours to do whatever else you do in capture, business development, et cetera. So when you're looking out and building your relationships, make sure you're sitting there keeping that number in mind. How many relationships do I want? How many strategic relationships? Not how many people do I know? I have 24,000 followers on LinkedIn. Are those all close relationships? I don't think so, right? And you could cut that in half. 12,000. Are those all close relationships? No. When I look into LinkedIn, frankly, what I'm looking for is my 24 people within LinkedIn that I would want to build a strategic relationship with. The other 23,900 and whatever thousand, right? Those people are all my network, the connections. If I can help them or they can help me, that's great. We'll pass in the day and the night, right? But there's certain group of people you want to develop strategic relationships with, and you need to determine a number and then a type of relationship. Who do I want to build those relationships with? Okay, so the first main tip. So I was talking about relationships there, and it's vital you have relationships if you want to have success in government contracting, in capture, especially getting in and talking to an agency about the opportunities you're pursuing. But I wanted to give you 2 specific tips that you really want to pursue in the next, going forward continuously. It's not even like it's a project, it's ongoing. So the first one is, I want you to demonstrate that your company or you are a subject matter expert in something. And when you do that, you will become a trusted advisor. So let me talk about what that means. First off, if you're not familiar with the term social selling, this basically is social media, right? Social selling is now this idea that everything is on the internet. We began to go that direction before social media ever came around. And I've been doing sales before the internet even came around. So I've been through these evolutions, which every single one of them are just fantastic because it just makes it easier and easier every time to build your network, to interact with people, to let them know who you are or who I am, right? So social selling, though, you can think about this on LinkedIn. That's where I really want you to focus on social selling. A second tier might be YouTube, but really social selling is done on LinkedIn. And it's this idea of two things. One is to be visible to the buyer and teammates when they're looking for you. So somehow being visible, and I'll talk about that in a second. And the other is for you to be able to research them and to engage them long before you ever meet them. This is the new norm, right? This is the new selling. Yes, there's still conferences or events you might go to, but those are bonus activities. The real activity and the real sales activity is in social selling. Your buyer is getting to know you and your offering long before they ever meet you or get a proposal from you. They're on the internet, they're doing the research. And so you want to be doing that same thing with agency personnel and with teammates. So when I describe it as subject matter expert, I'd be really curious on what your example is going to be. But from my perspective, it means you're good at something. You're really good at something. It always kind of amazes me when people start a company and they don't know what they're going to sell. I'm like, well, what gave you the idea to start the company in the first place? I'm not knocking it so much as I'm confused, but I'm definitely clear on this. You need to have a clear, focused offer if you're going to succeed as a business. And if you have a clear, focused offer, something that you can communicate really easily, that this is what we sell, this is who we sell it to, and this is the benefit that they'll get from it. If you have that, then theoretically you are a subject matter expert on that. So I know a customer who's somebody in our community who is an expert in elevator services. I know somebody else who's an expert in zero trust architecture. Somebody else who's an expert in enterprise network engineering. These are areas where they're subject matter experts, and so they know their stuff. That's the first thing. The second thing, by the way, quick sidebar for SDA, there's another thing that you can be considered out there when you're a subject matter expert. We like to say it's a supreme domain authority, right? You want to be seen as that supreme domain authority in your business. I don't know if you did this already, but in the chat, did you put 2 or 3 core words that said, this is our core competency, or 2 or 3 keywords that said, this is our core competency? If you did that, then theoretically, that's your subject matter expertise area, right? I'm a subject matter expert in project management or in workforce development. Whatever your 2 or 3 words are that describe your company, theoretically, that's your subject matter expertise. So you want to be putting that information out on LinkedIn. You want to be talking about that. Sometimes I see people talking about all these unrelated stuff, and you got to keep in mind, if the buyer is looking for somebody like you, you don't want them to see you talking about what I do or what this person does. You just want them to see you talking about elevator services or zero trust architecture or cybersecurity, right? One thing that's your core competency, that's what you talk about all the time. So that's what evolves you from being a subject matter expert to this trusted advisor. And the way you become a trusted advisor in social media and in social selling, obviously, you're sharing your content, you're sharing your information, you're sharing your how. But when you do this, you're becoming a trusted advisor to other people. I would submit that many of you who watch my trainings see me as a subject matter expert in government contracting, in particular in the BD and capture side of it, like not pricing. You see me this way because that's what I share all the time. And I'm a trusted advisor to you because you begin to see me sharing this all the time. And when you follow my tips, you see progress towards where you want to go. That's what makes me a trusted advisor, whether we meet or not, in your eyes. I want you to do the same thing on your area of expertise for your target buyers. Who are you trying to sell to? Are you trying to sell to the federal agency? If you're trying to sell yourself as an expert in this area, then share content about that. Become visible as a subject matter expert. And then it'll lead to a subject or a trusted advisor. So I wanted to give you 2 quick examples of how I did this myself. So one is, so I started using LinkedIn 2007. I've been using LinkedIn a long time, right? And initially, when I dove into it, I dove really fast into using it as a recruiting tool. A lot of people use it as a job tool where they're trying to get a job. For me, back in 2007, I had a Microsoft SharePoint company, a government contracting business. And so for 10 years, I had that business, and I used LinkedIn as a way to reach expert SharePoint people and people who were experts in Microsoft products so that I could hire them. but it was a great way for me to engage with them. And the way I did it was I was constantly sharing out SharePoint knowledge-based articles. That's what I've got here. So if you go back to YouTube and look at some of my very earliest videos, they weren't on government contracting. They were on SharePoint or Microsoft 365 products. And I would share that stuff out every day, right? And you don't have to do things every day. I'm a glutton for punishment, right? But you do want to do it on a weekly basis, maybe twice a week, but you share it out. And so I shared SharePoint knowledge-based articles out, this first example here, over and over for years. And I attracted not just the very candidates that I was looking for, but I attracted federal buyers and teammates who went, oh, you're always talking about SharePoint. We've got a project. It's got a piece that's SharePoint. Can you come talk to us? Right? I had third-party vendors coming and saying, hey, you do SharePoint. We kind of work with SharePoint. Can we talk? And so when you put your information out and you're free with the information you know around your area of expertise, you're going to attract the very people you want to reach. Second example is this very thing I'm doing right now, right? Since 2017, 2018, I started sharing government contracting tips on how to be successful as a small business owner or a small business within the government contracting space. In particular, I focused on sales. I said, yes, I've got experience across the entire government contracting spectrum. I've been a government contractor for over 20 years in 2 different companies. I got experience everywhere, but my true expertise is sales. Even in my last company, right? I wasn't the FSO or some of these other things. I was the salesperson, and that's the part I wanted to double down on. And so I've been doubling down on that since 2018, teaching tips constantly out there. And by doing that, it has enabled me to build a LinkedIn following of 24,000 people in the government contracting space. I have a newsletter that is a government contracting success newsletter with over 10,000 subscribers. These are 10,000 GovCon professionals who are subscribed to that newsletter. You can do the same thing in your space. You're not going to get to 10,000 subscribers right away, but if you get to 100, that's good. I have a particular business that I was just talking to this week, and I said, hey, I'm going to try to engage on some of your content and just double your followers in the next week or 2 just by engaging and letting my network know, right? I'm willing to help. You can do this yourself if you have subject matter expert information that you share. And so I really want to encourage you to do that. And I leave you with this one question before I move on. How can you start doing this today? What's your subject matter? What's your area of expertise, right? If you said, I'm just going to talk about this over and over, once a month, once a week, it doesn't matter. Definitely not once a day. But if you did this, what would your area of expertise be that you could be seen as a trusted advisor? And how can you start doing this today? Put that in the chat. If you're feeling comfortable, let me know. Okay, so I want to wrap up the training time because we'll end at 12:30 every day. About talking about industry days. I feel like sometimes people miss on industry days, and I want to make sure you understand the value of industry days and how you can maximize what is shared during industry day events, et cetera. So the first thing is, what are industry days? These are just the government trying to communicate with industry. We are industry, they are government, right? And so industry days is just their chance to come forward and share information. The whole point of it is dialogue. Many of the agencies don't get it, and sometimes they just spew information at us, but that's okay too, because they spew a lot of good stuff that we can do something with. When there's dialogue, it's even better, but that's not what I'm talking about today. Another example of an industry day, it might be called a vendor outreach session, right? Not officially an industry day, but a vendor outreach session. It's the same idea, government trying to communicate with industry. One of my favorites is the advanced planning briefs to industry, and there's different titles, and I'll show you those in a minute. But with these advanced planning briefs, they just share all sorts of information about the people who are running their program offices, the focuses of dissatisfaction, and they talk about upcoming opportunities that you might be interested in pursuing. So let's go ahead and dive into that. So let me just pop over here. I'm going to show several different ones. So here's one I shared yesterday, and this is coming out of the Navy, out of NAVWAR, and this is NIWC Atlantic. And so if I just, and I'm going to go pretty fast because I'm watching the time here and I want to show you the slides. You can come back here and watch the replay and slow it down. But this one here was just hosted last month, right? And if I pop through, let me come through here really quick. I'm going to go fairly fast. But the first thing is, right, remember, getting in the door, it's about relationships. Having relationships begins with knowing people. So here's Steve Harnig, who's the basically head of contracting over at NIWC, right? He's a great one to know. Even if you can't really have long meetings with him, he might introduce you to the people downstream, et cetera. but you get his name. So let me go through a couple of these slides because those don't matter to what I'm saying. And so here, so it starts getting to forecast. I'm in an industry day slide where now I start getting people's names. Here's Todd Rollins, and I can start looking at C4I and readiness and see what he's managing. I can look in here and go, well, is he a program office person, or is he part of the contracting shop that supports this program office or PMW 700? So the different projects in there. And then as you come forward, right, you see the opportunities that are in here. Here's small business set aside. So this is good information that's in here. This is one example of an industry day brief that has information that you can capitalize on. So what you would want to do is to take some of this and maybe reach out to Todd and say, hey, Todd, can we have a conversation? I wanted to ask you about this telephony, engineering and technical logistics, blah, 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 right? And then you go forward. Here's Erica Smoke, I think her name is. I might get it wrong. But here it's talking about enterprise systems and expeditionary warfare. This is something one of my customers would be interested in. And if I move forward and I look at her opportunities, I can see some of this is really interesting to me, like this whole idea of acquisition logistics, right? So I would follow up. That's one example. That was October, right? I put out tons of these. If you're not following me, follow me. And it's a great way to see what you might have missed. That one was like 17 pages. This one is 112 pages. I think actually, if you come over here, so I'm just going to my activity. So if you're following me, you can come find it in here. But if I come down here, you can see an article I just shared this week, and it's NAVSEA Industry Day for October. And if you come into this one, you will see that I shared this and I broke it down by cyber engineering and digital transformation, by industrial operations or logistics directorate, IWS. So you can see I've got it broken down and you can go into it. These, though, all came from here, the 112 slides that came out of NAVSEA. And Ann Bannister runs that small business group over there. And these guys are one of the best reaching out and engaging industry and discussion. But if I go through really quick, and sorry for hitting the slides a lot, but let me just come down. I guess I could have lined it up, but just bear with me 1 second. It's a little brutal. So now if you come in here, I'm looking at, so here are PEOs. These are program executive offices. These are big groups. And the reason I want to point this out, though, is if you look down, this is the title slide. The very first thing I'm seeing is an org chart. When I come down, I don't need you to see all the words necessarily, but right here, the deputy program directors, those are small business advocates. And so throughout this entire deck, NAVSEA and the program executive offices down below are communicating who are the people you should be talking to. Whoa, sorry about that. Who are the people out there that you should talk to? Here's another example with PEO IWS, right? All these small business advocates. Did you know those people's names? I didn't before the industry day, but I see it. And I'm like, okay, let me start building relationships. And if you build your relationships long-term, you can be getting on these people's radar over and over again. Let me show you one other. This one here, I just shared this morning. I didn't share this particular one, but I did share something about the Defense Human Resource Activity, or DHRA. I shared this out, but here's this huge deck that they have, and this is a little bit outdated because this is 2022, but you can go in here and it's the same thing. Sorry about that. It just pops down. But as you come through, you can start getting a lot of information. Let me drop down a little farther. You can see about opportunities they have. You can begin to see how their organization is structured, right? You can see the spends that they have, et cetera. Like here's a $2 million one. These are huge. Let me show you one more tip here. So in industry days, sometimes they put out the attendee list. And so if you come in here I'm able to look at all these different companies and realize, oh, some of them are small business, some of them are not. But these are people who attended this event and who said that they were interested in maybe teaming up with others. And so you got names, emails, and phone numbers. When you're trying to build relationships and when you're thinking about success comes from relationships, then going to an industry day and looking for the slides, looking for the attendee list, this enables you to be able to build a lot of relationships or start reaching out in order to build a lot of relationships. So here's what I want you to remember from today's training. First, the key to success is the relationships, like I've been saying over and over again. So make sure you're doing enough outreach to develop those relationships. It's the whole reason our workshop that we sell is on relationships. The second thing is dig your well before you're thirsty. Don't wait until the last minute to go, oh, I need somebody over there. Start thinking about it. Be proactive. The third thing is maximize those industry day events. If you're not sure what they are, reach out to the small business specialist and say, hey, how do I track on every industry day event that you do? For all of us, as you go forward through the rest of your day, just remember, government contracting, it's not a secret. It's a process. I'll see you in the next training. There's my boys.